You as a better version of yourself is always going to show up with exceptionally better results in all of the areas of life because that's who you are and that's the outcomes that you create when you're that person.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Den. And this week's edition is something that I'm pretty pumped and pretty juiced about as far as having the guests that I have on today. I'm going to tell a little bit of a story. I kind of got fed into his feed, and then all of a sudden his feed started becoming more and more prevalent in my feed. Obviously, social media, reels, algorithms, all that good digital marketing shit. But let me introduce our audience to Sean Michael Crane. Welcome to the Den. It is truly a pleasure to have you on today, and I thank you for the opportunity for us to spend some time talking to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you having me here, brother. And just so you know, that's no coincidence that you saw my content on your feed, right? When you know what you're doing, when you know about marketing, it works that way. But that's another topic, man. I'm grateful to be here and that our paths have crossed.
No doubt. We've had some good conversations, whether it be text, whether it be Facebook Messenger, whether it be phone, whether it be pre-podcast call. And, you have a lot of things going on, and your story is pretty darn unique. And I think that a lot of the people that are either clients of ours, whether they be just people that we've worked with, people that follow us at One SEO here, really can utilize today's podcast as a way to really say that everybody has an unstoppable mindset. They just need to untap the power of that mindset. And I think that your story of where you kind of have gone and what you've done and where it's kind of being the vision that you have is a really, really cool story. And I'm excited to talk about it. But as I do when I have a den, maybe different than Lance or CJ, I always like to hit everybody with those 4 rapid fire questions right out of the gate, just to kind of forget about what you do, forget about where you are, what you have going on in your life. And, then we can get into the background, but just random questions. So these are totally random, but appropriate to Sean Michael Crane. Okay.
Let's hear it.
All right,
I'm ready.
My first one might touch off a sentimental aspect, but you go by Sean Michael. Is that because of your Uncle Mike?
My middle name is derived from my Uncle Mike. Absolutely. When I came home from prison, I started putting the Michael in my name. Before prison, I was Sean Crane. And I just thought, man, I'm different now. I'm evolved. I'm Sean Michael Crane. And it just stuck.
Well, we're going to get into that part in a second. Okay. Favorite food, if you had to have a choice of a favorite food, steak or seafood?
I mean, steak, man. I'm a ribeye guy or a tomahawk, but yeah, that's me all day long. I've been eating a little more filet lately to try to stay, leaner off the fat, but steak all day long.
Perfect. I know that you don't drink anymore. We'll get into that part as well. But do you drink coffee?
Yeah. All I drink is water and black coffee. I drink a lot of coffee.
Is it water or coffee that's going to be your drink of choice?
I mean, for the rest of my life, it'd be water because, there's water in coffee. So maybe I can get away with that. But,
you drink it black.
Black coffee.
Legs or chest day? Which one do you dislike more?
Oh shit. I mean, there's a love-hate relationship with legs. It's the hardest and it's my favorite because you have to really tap into that beast and you can't fake that day. So, I mean, I don't hate either. I love legs more just because it gets me in the right fucking mindset and takes me to another level in that day.
All right. I heard you say in a podcast in 2018, so we're going back 4 or 5 years, might have been your first podcast you ever did, that you were going to, as you made changes, which we'll obviously get into today, that you wanted to start to do things that you wouldn't have normally done earlier in your life, that obviously the events that we'll get into have. Have you been to a symphony or an orchestra event?
This is good. I had something scheduled. Let's just blame it on COVID, okay? COVID shut everything down. No, I had something scheduled for me and my wife, and it fell through. I have not. And you know what? I'm so glad that you brought that up because this is how I operate. I'm going to write this down. and I'm going to do that.
I love it.
I love that. This is how right away, if there's an idea or something that I haven't acted upon that I know I need to, I write it down. I capture that thought and idea because otherwise it would just disappear later on. Now I have to go look it up on Google or something and we're done and schedule it for me and my wife.
Well, listen, the bottom line is this. There is there's a very interesting story that comes at play about your life. And obviously you have this organization of Unstoppable Mindset. You've written your own book. But I think that where I'd like to kind of take the audience in our conversation is really kind of going back in time to some of the things that led to some big things. Give us a little bit of background, where you grew up, what brought you, kind of what life was like during your adolescent years into high school, and, what kind of person you were, because obviously the person you were is not the person you are.
Yeah, I mean, growing up as a young kid, like younger than the age of 10, life was beautiful. I think for a lot of people, those first 10 years of our life do seem magical because we haven't been introduced to the chaos of our world yet, right? And we're not fearful, we're not doubtful, we're just living, man. And as a kid, I was just full of passion and such good energy. I wanted to be a professional baseball player. Sports was my world. Every day after school or at school or whatever I was doing in class, I was drawing up plays. After class, I was out on the playground. After school, I was at home throwing the baseball on the roof, throwing it against this brick wall in the backyard, fielding it. Like all I wanted to do was play sports. And I felt fully capable to carry those dreams out, man. That was like a time in my life where I just had so much certainty and belief in who I was. And as I started getting older, I started having awareness that changed that. I started seeing my parents fight a lot. I started like recognizing that they were altered or on some type of drugs or alcohol. I didn't understand at the time, but I knew they were different than my aunts and uncles or my friends' parents. And then things progressively got worse. I'd see them fight. The cops would come home. I saw my mother overdose 3 times as a young boy between the age of 10 and 12. Like I saw her dead on the floor. She overdosed at my grandparents' house. She overdosed again at home. And I was the oldest. So I had to take my brother and sister into the room and try to shelter them from what was going on. But it was traumatic for me, man. And I didn't really know what was taking place because I was still young and naive. And so as I got into my early teenage years, 13, then 14, my whole world just fell apart. At the age of 14, my dad went to prison for having a pistol, and he literally almost got in a shootout right in front of our house. He had a standoff with the cops, and I thought he was going to die right in front of me that night. And he didn't shoot, he didn't pull out a gun, so they didn't kill him, but they arrested him and took him to jail. And he ended up going to prison for a year and a half. And then in that time, my mom started not coming home. She found a new boyfriend because her and my dad were unhappy. And when he was in prison, she really looked at it as an opportunity to do what she had wanted to do for many years. So then my mom wasn't coming home. And here I am at 14, first month in freshman year in high school, trying to figure out who I am as a young man. What's my path in life, forming that identity. And I lost both my parents. My mom stopped coming home. She got strung out on alcohol and drugs. And my dad was in prison. And so in that moment, man, my whole world just got turned upside down. That kid who was passionate, who was certain in who he was and what he was capable of in life, he was just crushed. That person died.
Was athletics starting to take a decrease in your life at that point?
Yeah. So, at that time, I had stopped playing sports as much around 13 because I was falling in love with surfing. I'm from Southern California and Santa Barbara. And, the beach life is really cool for us. I love to surf. I had the same passion for surfing as I did sports. I just loved being out in the ocean. I felt free of my problems. I felt like I could just focus on being myself and having fun as a kid. And when that happened with my parents, I stopped surfing. Never played sports in high school. That whole side of me just died. That person just like went extinct, man. I don't know how to describe it, but I felt no connection to that person. And it's because I was so broken inside. I was so shocked and in disbelief as to what had taken place that I didn't know what to do, man. I just didn't know how to process that emotion. And so the only thing that I found that could momentarily help me was drinking, smoking weed, doing drugs. I started hanging out with these kids in school that maybe came from rough backgrounds or were going through similar things. And we just identified with each other. We clicked, So I stopped hanging out with my old friends. I stopped going home. I stopped going to school and I just hung out with this new group of friends. And my number one goal every day was just to numb myself. Like I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I thought just smoking was cool, drinking was fun and wild. But I was so heartbroken, man, and so distraught that I just gravitated towards those things as a crutch. And what happened is I started becoming just like my parents. The people I was so upset with, the people who I was so angry at and resentful towards, I started going down that same path that they had been on in life. And from 14 until 24, 10 years, I was abusing drugs and alcohol every day and I was heavily addicted. And I didn't do anything I was proud of in my life at that time. I mean, I managed to graduate high school. I worked a little bit after school for my uncle's tree service company, which did teach me the value of hard work, how to be disciplined, you know, really like grit and like what it takes to be a man in this world, I feel. But other than that, I had nothing positive going for me in my life.
What were you doing in the tree service business? Were you like climbing trees, sawing, chainsawing, all that good shit?
Yeah, so you know what? It was a really cool experience because by this time my dad had come back into my life. He was still battling addiction, in and out of jail that whole stretch from 14 till I was 18. But after high school, I had nothing going for me. No vision, no goals. And my uncle Mark basically reached out to me and said, "Hey man, I got a job for you. Like I know you have nothing to focus on. Come work for me in my tree service." And so I did. I started with groundwork, dragging brush, carrying logs. I quickly elevated my status to climber, which now is up in the trees with chainsaws. And it was hard work, man. And I loved it. We'd work our ass off every day. My dad, my uncles. I was with family, which was really cool. I learned a lot. It helped build confidence. It helped build work ethic. And those are traits and characteristics that I carried over into the later years of life. The one thing that I was immensely proud of at that time was I would work my ass off every week, and I'd only make $1,000 a week. You know, and to me, that was actually good money. 4,000 a month. I'm 18. You know, I don't really have any expenses, but I would give all that money to my uncle Mike, who had taken over raising my siblings and I. So every week I'd give him $900 and I'd keep $100. And all my friends thought I was crazy, but it was an honor for me because my uncle Mike stepped up and took care of Sarah, Kevin, and I, my brother and sister, and myself, when my mom and dad were gone. And so out of high school, he's older now, he's in his 60s, he can't really work. And for me, it was an honor to be able to provide for them financially. So that was like the only thing that I was proud of at that time in my life.
Did you feel like when you got, as you grew up with what you grew in that job, did sobriety come into your life at that point in time? Or was it a situation you were still battling the alcohol addiction and drugs as far as what was going on?
No, I hadn't dealt with all the trauma and all the pain. I was just suppressing it. So I mean, it got to the point where we'd smoke a joint and then I'd go climb up in the tree and work. We'd smoke weed at work. We would drink sometimes at the end of the day, or like that's when my dad and I's relationship became really toxic because he became really like a friend, you know? And we were codependent. He would drink on the way home from work. I would drink with him while I'm driving, or we'd smoke a joint at lunch. And it was just, we were functioning addicts, you know what I mean? It's what we did. So I wanted to get sober. I tried to get sober and it lasted for about 6 months. No alcohol, no weed, no pills, anything. But I wasn't ready yet, man. I couldn't commit fully. And so I ended up relapsing right before I got incarcerated.
You bring up the incarceration. Tell a little audience about what kind of transpired. Was this, you know, just if you're, obviously, I think you're comfortable. I know you talk about it quite openly. Talk about what happened.
Yeah, well, I wrote a book about it, right? Prison of Your Own is the story of my incarceration and what I did in prison to change my life. So growing up, I was wild. I was a little reckless, but I was never a bad person. You know, if you saw me at a party, we'd talk, we'd shoot the shit, I'd go chase some girls. I might get a little drunk at the end of the night and get into a wrestling match, or, you know, I was a young, rambunctious young man. Like, I think a lot of us can identify with that growing up in our teens and early 20s. And so, you know, I was at this party one night. I was 23. We went to this party in this really beautiful area of Santa Barbara called the Mesa, which is these cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And it was a college party. And I showed up and I didn't really know a lot of people. I went with my childhood friend. He was my best friend since kindergarten. And we went there just to chase girls and to drink and have a good night. And so throughout the night, there was an argument between these two groups of people. One of the groups of people we had been talking to. So we were like right there with them, watching the altercation, waiting for the fight to take place in the kitchen, and nothing happened and it died down. So at the very end of the night, we're literally leaving the party. Me and my friend are leaving. Everyone's kind of dispersing. And that same altercation between those two groups of men starts taking place on the front lawn. And like an idiot, like a drunk young man wanting to see a fight and just very, very naive, I go up and I'm right there, like in proximity to this altercation. And then it breaks down, it breaks out. The fight starts taking place. People are flying everywhere, throwing punches. And I get tackled from the side. And my first thought is, damn, these guys are jumping me. They thought I was with that other group. They're gonna kick my ass, you know. And so I'm bear hugging someone as he's pushing me back, and I get slammed into a car and then slammed on the ground. And all I'm trying to do is bear hug this guy on top of me so that he can't posture up and punch me in the face. And I thought his friends, whoever else were attacking me, were going to kick me and stomp me out. That's literally what I thought. And no one started hitting me. No one was punching me. And I'm just holding this guy on top of me, trying to roll him off. And I couldn't. He was a big guy. And eventually, after 3 or 4 times back and forth, I rolled him off the side of me. And the only thought I had was punch this guy in the face. He's trying to attack you, like hit him before he hits you.
Right.
And I threw 2 punches down at him as I'm standing up, and they just grazed the side of his head. I didn't hit him flush, but he stayed down when I stood up. And I thought that was weird. I didn't hit him. I didn't knock him out. Why is he not getting up? And right when I thought that, all I heard was someone yelling, Sean, let's go. Oh, Sean, let's go. Get out of here. And it was my childhood friend who I was at the party with. And I started moving towards him, and I couldn't even run or anything. I had jacked up my hip and back when I got tackled into that car. So I'm limping, Bill, and it's like slow motion, man. I'm like limping towards him, and I get to him in the street, and there's a street lamp, and I step under it, and his eyes just light up. He goes, "Oh my gosh, Sean, what the hell? You're covered in blood." And dripping off my face, all on my arms, my whole body. I'm literally soaked in someone's blood. And I knew it wasn't mine. I checked it first, and I just realized I'm just covered in blood. And he takes off up the street and starts running. He's like, let's go, let's get out of here. And by this time, everyone's coming out of the party to see what happened. I hear girls screaming, I hear sirens. And it was something out of like a scene in a movie. You know, everyone's just dispersing now. And I'm limping up the street, slow motion. I couldn't run. You know, my body was so jacked. And I see him waving me into this room, this like offshoot off the street, and it was a laundromat. And he's waving me in there. And as I walk into the laundromat, cop cars race by me with their lights on. They didn't see me. They go to the party. And I go into the laundromat, and he throws a shirt at me. He's like, hey, put this shirt on. You can't walk around like that. Get that shirt off. And so I put this shirt on. And man, I'm so heavily intoxicated. I'm not even coherent at this point. You know, I did so much drugs and alcohol that night. I didn't even really know what was going on. I was in shock. And so then we start walking up the street, and he had called a cab before we left. So a cab was waiting for us. We jumped in the cab and went back to his place. And I just passed out on his floor, man. I passed out on his floor, and I woke up, and it was like that moment you're like, oh, you're like gasping for air. You're like, wait, did that really happen last night? And I grab my phone and I type in fight at the Mesa. And it says on Google, 2 men were stabbed at a party on the Mesa. One of them's in critical condition on life support. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I just had the worst feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I thought the cops were going to come look for me and detain me and try to get me to tell them what happened. I thought they were going to question me and really press me for information. And they did come. They came later that day with the SWAT team. They had like 15 cop cars, the forensic unit. They had AR-15s. They had their dogs. And they pulled me outside. They put me on my knees. They cuffed me up. And then they put me in the car, and they came and said, hey, we're charging you with attempted murder. You're going to jail for attempted murder. You're under arrest. And I couldn't believe it. I was in complete shock. And still at that time, I thought that they were trying to scare me. I thought that they were just using tactics. Right. I never believed in a million years that they assumed I was guilty, because I knew in my heart I was innocent. I didn't stab anyone. I got tackled. I wrestled around. I threw some punches. Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I'm an idiot for being involved, but I didn't stab anyone. And that's not what they believed. Everyone at the party saw me on top of the guy. They said we saw Sean striking down at him and then running away. And it was just written up so horribly to make me look like the guilty party.
Obviously, you get arrested. And generally speaking, from an arrest standpoint, you go to a county jail while you're waiting to be go through trial, or whether plea out or whatever it might be, before you head off to prison. How long were you in the county environment for?
Yeah, so I was in county jail for 8 months. They put me in a cell that I never left. I would leave maybe a couple times a week to shower or to go to court. Other than that, I was locked down for 24 hours a day. And the cell was so small, I could touch the walls at the same time. It was a concrete 6x8 cell that I lived in with another person. So I was in that cell for 8 months leading up to me getting sent to prison.
How many times did you run that scenario of that night through your head? Because one of the things that I've experienced, not prison, well, I have been arrested, but for defiant trespassing, but that's a different story, another time for another podcast. But as far as with regards to me, I was in the Navy. I was on submarines. You go on a submarine, they take you out, you go down underwater, you're locked in. The only thing you have in that environment is time and your mind. The mind can play a ridiculous amount of games with you. How was that period of that 8 months as far as your mind goes? Was it, am I getting reconditioned? Is it, I'm pissed off, I'm bitter, I'm angry, I'm alive? What kind of happened in that 8 months that you're going through that?
Yeah, I mean, it was the most impactful 8 months of my life. I remember sitting in there for the first couple of weeks just in complete shock and disbelief. And I was still in denial. I was still hoping that some new information was going to come out and I would be exonerated. But the more times I went to court, the more times I realized, like, no, they believe you did this. They want to send you to prison. You know what I mean? Like, that's what the message was from the DA, from the judge, from my attorney. Like, they didn't care, man. They see these guys come in all the time who get in fights, who commit these crimes, and they assumed I was guilty. Everybody, my lawyer did, everybody involved, the cops, every single person. And so I'm sitting there, man, trying to make sense of this. And, being isolated like that is such a unique opportunity. I think most people will never get the chance to just sit there for such an extended period of time and really find out who we are on a deeper level. There was no phone, no kids, no job, nothing to go race off and do. It was just me and my truth. And this was the first time in over 10 years that I was finally willing to sit down and acknowledge the truth about myself and my life and who I'd let myself become. Using drugs and alcohol for all those years allowed me to stay in denial and not really hold myself accountable. Like, hey, man, you're becoming someone that you're not really going to love in life. Hey, you're becoming someone that's way below his potential. Like, I never stopped and actually thought about that. So sitting in this cell, I started replaying all the years of my life to that point, and I had nothing but regret. And let me tell you this, man, the amount of regret that I started to feel for the life that I had lived was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. I started thinking about all the excuses I made, how I held back, how I didn't play sports, how I didn't really apply myself and show the world who I was, because I knew in my heart that I was capable of so much more, but I hadn't given effort to my life. I had just settled, gone through the motions. And because of that, I wasted so many years. And in that moment, I just had to sit in that pain. There was no pill. There was no drink. I had to feel it. And that pain, man, it did something to me. It helped me to understand what's really at stake in this life. Like, when we hold back, when we make excuses, we never get that moment back. And I think a lot of people live like this is a rehearsal or there's a do-over and a second chance. And there's not. I got one, thank God. And I'm here to live my life so much differently because of that. But most people are going to have these thoughts and realizations when it's too late. Those last 90 days of life, when they finally get diagnosed with cancer, when something happens to a loved one and it caused them to pause and reflect on their life, suddenly they realize all of these things that I started to understand in that cell. And I remember in that moment, I just made a promise to myself, Bill. I made a promise to myself that I was never again going to contribute to that feeling, that every day, whether I was in prison for life, 10 years, or I got out tomorrow, I was going to be my best self. Like, I had to show the world and prove to myself who I really was. It was just this impetus, this energy that was born within me. And my life has been different ever since. I want to touch on what you were talking about, though. Like, the mind is so powerful, right? And most of us don't use it for good. Most of us don't realize we're using our own mind against ourselves. That's what I started to realize in that cell. I'd wake up every morning and I would just be so depressed over the life that I had just lived. Or I would be immensely anxious and fearful about my future. And I'd start thinking about all these scenarios. And all of a sudden, my mind would just be going crazy. And I felt like I was in a living hell. Like, it didn't matter if I was doing life in prison. How am I going to get through this day? I felt like I was going to go insane. So that's when I learned such powerful strategies to take control of my mental state and really focus on being in the present moment. Because in the present moment It's impossible to experience depression, anxiety, or that type of stress. We create it through these delusional thoughts or creating expectations into the future or thinking about the past, stuff we have no control over. But when you're living in the present moment and you train your mind to do so, there's literally none of those negative emotions. You're just present and you're existing and you're moving forward towards something better, hopefully. But that's what I started training myself to do in that cell, and it changed my whole life.
So that started while you were going through the county, while you're going through your trial, et cetera, et cetera. You get sentenced to go to prison. Did they immediately come with 7 years, or what was the sentence that you were actually sentenced to?
Yeah. So I took a plea deal.
Okay.
After 8 months of fighting my case, nothing was happening. Finally, one day, my lawyer, I think they visited me, or I got a phone call from them, and they said, "Hey, the DA is willing to drop your charges from attempted murder to assault with a deadly weapon if you admit guilt." And at this point, man, I knew that I had to take that plea deal because the way that the police report was written up against me, all the evidence they had a bloody shirt, they had people telling on me, eyewitness testimony. It looked horrible. No one in court wins in trial, especially in my county. The conviction rate's like 99%.
Right.
The DAs send people to prison left and right. I knew if I was going to take it to trial, the likelihood of me spending multiple decades in prison was very likely. So in that moment, because of the changes I made in those 8 months, like the 8 months in the county jail was just such a spiritual awakening for me. First, it was just being honest with myself, getting control over my mental state, then daily actions that started building me up. I mean, in my cell every day, I was exercising, I was reading, I was writing. I had a little pocket dictionary I was reading in the cell just to stimulate my mind and to feel like I was doing something productive. I was writing short stories, creative writing. I was exercising, doing thousands of push-ups and squats every day. Like I was doing things in that cell that made me feel proud of who I was. And just that action and effort every day gave me the feeling that I could go to prison and continue to leverage this time incarcerated and get out a better man. That was my mindset. So when they gave me the opportunity to take the plea deal, I took it. And my mindset was, I'm going to use this time in prison, these 7 years they just gave me, to massively transform my life. And I'm going to come home and live the rest of my life the right way, the way I know how. And so I ended up doing 5.5 years off that 7 years.
So my military career was 5.5. So I think we had the same sentence. Mine's a bit different one, but the interesting thing is that you take people that I've talked to that have been incarcerated, they say that it's probably one of the most negative environments that somebody can be in. How did you stay so positive in such a negative environment? Because I think that transcends to business. I think that having positivity in a workplace, when things aren't as positive as they should be, you can create an environment that you're the positive light. Was that kind of your approach while you were incarcerated?
Yeah, well, a lot of people ask me that, and honestly, prison was the perfect setting to change because every day I had reminders everywhere I looked of how I didn't want to be. I didn't want to have that attitude. I didn't want to be like that person. So it was always a reminder for me of what was at stake, and it compelled me to do the right thing. But there's really two ways that you can overcome a situation like that. Like in the workplace, you could fire someone, you can leave your job, you can remove yourself. I couldn't remove myself from my circumstances. I was stuck in them. So I had to change the meaning I associated with my experience. I wasn't thinking about how negative it was. I wasn't thinking about, oh, poor me, I'm in prison. I was thinking about how, man, I don't want to be like those guys. So I'm going to do everything they're not doing. I'm not going to talk like them. I'm not going to walk like them. I'm not going to be like them. Okay, every day, I'm giving meaning to this set of circumstances, using it to push me forward to do the right things versus looking at it as a negative or a punishment. I never thought of prison as a punishment. I thought about, man, I can educate myself in here. I can get in good physical shape. I can focus on being positive. And if I can endure my time in prison with this mindset, imagine what I can do when I come home. So it was my self-talk every day. It was positive. It was uplifting. I was training my mind to see prison as an opportunity, not a detriment to my growth and who I was becoming. And because of that, every day I literally got up and I was motivated. I was inspired. I took action and I continued to build myself up during that time.
One of the big things you talked about that led you kind of to being in that environment was the sobriety. That sobriety you could have still stayed unsober in prison. There's plenty of documented cases of alcohol, drugs, whatever you need is there. Do you think that that county time said, I'm never going to pick up a bottle, a drink, a pill, a joint ever in my life again? Because I think one of the big things that, the more and more, and, we do a lot of business with a lot of home services. I started to get surprised by how many people have battled addiction in all forms, whether it be drugs, alcohol, porn, gambling. People live on that constant edge. Is your new addiction, do you think it's fair to say, is mental and physical health and helping others? Is that Sean's new addiction?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, if you're addicted to things that continuously help you in your life in a positive way, then like that's such a good thing. That's what we're all after, But when we have habits that are addicting, that deteriorate the quality of our life over time, well, those become problems. Eating too much food, drinking too much alcohol, watching too much porn, gambling too much. You see these things erode the quality of individuals' lives. So I remember when I first got incarcerated, guys were coming in with all kinds of stuff. There was heroin, there was pills, there was all kinds of stuff. I was getting high the first month, man. I just wanted to numb myself and pretend it wasn't real. And in the midst of the first couple of months, I got into 2 fights. And because jail's crazy, like you got to do stuff. You're put in situations where you basically have to fight. And that's when I got moved to isolation. And when I got moved to isolation, I had so much more time to just think. And I just was sitting there going, damn, what are you doing, Sean? I remember one day in particular, I was coming off of all these drugs. My skin was just all nasty. I just felt horrible. I'm facing life in prison. I felt so lonely and so depressed and at my rock bottom. And I'm sitting there just thinking, man, what are you doing? You're facing life in prison. You're still doing these things. This is what's killed your family members. This is what, broke apart your family and your home life. This is what led to you being abandoned by your parents. And now you're still contributing to this type of life. And man, in that moment, I just made a promise to myself that I was going to stay sober forever. I just knew what I was up against in this fight that lay ahead of me. And I just realized, man, I have to get sober and stay sober forever. I can't even have not 1% of me thinking that I could drink or do something later on in life. I have to commit to a life of sobriety forever. And I did. And that was 10 years ago. And that's what really allowed my mind and my spirit to come alive, because now I'm sitting in this cell. The weight of my predicament is just so drastic. Life in prison, everything's at stake. So it's the severity of my situation. Now my sobriety, that was allowing me to feel in a way I hadn't felt for so long, like my emotions, like just, I had clarity. I was starting to come alive. And it was those things. And then in combination with the regret that I felt and knowing I didn't give my all to my life, it just created this energy inside of me, man, that has changed everything for me. And I've never looked back since those moments.
So you get out of prison, you have your release date. And the fact is that you did the time and got out in a timely manner, because that's one of the things that you see in the, incarceration aspects, is that people allow the things that happen behind the scenes to control their end date to it. So you get out and you have this, obviously this great mental health. What was the kind of game plan from a professional standpoint? Because it seems like you were very calculated in everything that you do. Where did it kind of go? And what was what was your aspects of and aspirations coming out of what you were going to do to support yourself from a financial standpoint?
Yeah, well, I knew I wanted to help people. When I was incarcerated, a lot of guys started seeing my daily routines, my work ethic. They started seeing how positive I was in that environment. And they would start asking me questions or reaching out to me. And I would work out with those guys. A lot of them, I helped them get in good shape, lose weight, build muscle, build confidence. Then we talk about life beyond the walls, start talking about life in a more favorable manner, a more positive manner. And so I realized in the midst of working with these guys, about a dozen inmates, that, man, this is what I want to do in my life. I love working with people. I want to help people, and I knew I had a heart to serve. And that's really when I unveiled my purpose as a coach and leader. And so coming home, I knew I wanted to work with people. Incarcerated, I studied everything about exercise anatomy, sports medicine, nutrition. I read every book I can get my hands on. I got multiple degrees. I got psychology, sociology, business. One other one, I can't even think of the name right now, but I got those associate's degrees. So I was building this education, building building this knowledge base. Now I had experience working with people. But when I came home, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I was either going to go back to school and get a master's degree and work with kids who are struggling as a counselor or therapist for at-risk youth, or I was going to go into the fitness industry. I didn't know. I knew I wanted to do something helping people. And it was really cool because my hand was kind of forced, you know. When I went to enroll for college, because of the timing of when I got out, I wouldn't be able to enroll for like 6 months in the fall semester or something. So like, well, I'm not waiting 6 days, let alone 6 months, man. I'm ready to go now. And I went through my contacts and reached out to an old friend who I knew was a personal trainer and asked him, hey, like, what do I do to start as a personal trainer? Can you give me tips or advice? And he goes, man, I'm actually looking to expand. I have a lot of clients right now. I'm looking to bring on another trainer under me. I know that you're passionate about fitness. I know you changed your life in prison. Let's meet and talk about this. So we met and spoke, and he saw I was motivated. He knew like I had the right mindset going into it, and I was in good shape and I could help people. So he told me, hey, get certified, and then we'll get you down here at the gym. You could talk to the owner, and I'll give you some clients that you could train underneath me in my business. And so I remember the next 2 weeks, I just locked myself in my aunt and uncle's office, and I took all the tests. I read all the material related to becoming certified. And this is a process that usually takes like 3-6 months. I did it in 2 weeks, and then I got certified, and I went back to Santa Barbara where I live, where I'm from, and started working with him in the gym. And that was just the first step for me, man. I knew I needed to get one step in the right direction. I had the vision of having just a massive impact on the world, being a worldwide speaker, a coach. Like I have the vision, but for me, I just knew that I had to start moving towards it every day. And that's all I cared about, was just like building that momentum and getting traction and moving towards the person I wanted to be in the career that I want.
So the first client that you had when you went back, what was that like? Go ahead. You were going to say something about it.
Well, I didn't realize this till you asked me that. The first client I had was a sheriff in the county that I was arrested in. So I come in at 5 a.m. and I'm training my first client, and I'll never forget. He's like this tall guy. His name's Tom. We still speak to this day. And he was actually a bailiff in the Santa Barbara courthouse, and he had worked in the county jail. He knew who I was. I was all trying to play it cool and like pretend like, you know, whatever. I mean, I didn't even care, honestly. I was so focused on my mission, and I was ready just to prove to people who I was, that I didn't come out with any insecurities or any fears about being a felon or an ex-con. I knew that I had passion, charisma, energy, and I could help people. And so that first morning was great. I was like, dude, I'm doing it. I am doing it. I'm 2 months out of prison. I'm making money helping this guy right now. Like, I loved it. And sure enough, it turns out he ended up being a bailiff, and he and I became great friends. But from there, I started acquiring more clients. And then about 6 or 8 months later, I just felt like I was getting stagnant. I didn't feel as enthused about what I was doing. And it's because I'm not an employee, man. I'm a leader. I'm a boss. I'm a CEO. I just knew I wanted to run my own show. And so I ended up leaving that gym and starting my own business as a fitness coach in Santa Barbara. And I started acquiring clients from all over, working out of multiple gyms and getting really good results for people, and started to make a little money. At this time, I'm starting a family as well. But in my mind, I knew personal training is not something that I'm going to do forever. Like, this isn't a way that you're going to buy a big, beautiful home in Santa Barbara. This isn't a way you're going to take care of your wife and 3 kids. In that time, I started looking into online platforms and how to market myself online, how to create online coaching programs. And that was right when COVID shut all the gyms down. COVID shut everything down. And overnight, I lost my clients, my in-person business, all my revenue. And I had my daughter, Scarlett, was 1 year old. My son, Mason, was 10. He was now doing school on Zoom at home. And my wife was pregnant with Preston. So my wife wasn't working. I told her, you're not going back to work. I'm taking care of you and the kids. And I just lost all my income and clients overnight. And I remember sitting there at like 4 a.m, just stressed out, going, what am I going to do? I told my wife I was going to take care of them. You know, she believed in me. She supported me. You know, I've only been out of prison like a year and a half, but like, what am I going to do? How am I going to take care of them? And I remember I was so close to calling Uncle Mark back and saying, hey, can I come do the tree service for a little while just to make some money and to kind of like get a foundation under my feet and then figure out what I want to do. And man, in that moment, I just sat there and I'm like, man, you've been through so much, Sean. You went to prison. Like, you come from a broken home, all that pain, all that suffering, all the struggling you went through as a young man. You're just going to like go back now and just settle and quit and give up on this dream. You fought so hard to get here. And in that moment, I just said, that I'm not going back. I'm going to find a way to continue going down this new path. I've been going down it. I've been, believing in myself. I've had faith. I've had courage. And look at it, it's working out. Keep going. Don't stop now. And I just started picking up my phone, man, and talking about my story online. I started marketing myself on Facebook and Instagram. I created some online programs. And in that year, my business blew up. People were intrigued by my story. I started getting my clients great results with their mindset, their fitness, their habits. And from there, I never looked back. I've been able to take care of my family. I've been able to consistently grow in my profession, my influence. And man, it's been just an incredible journey. But that moment was so crucial because I think a lot of people would have chose the security, the safety, the sure thing, especially with 3 kids, especially with a family to take care of.
Right.
But I just knew in my heart, man, if I believed and I just didn't quit and I just kept going, I could make it work. And it was those 2,000 days in prison of doing the right thing when no one was around. 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 squats while everyone else slept before breakfast, reading every day, studying every day, getting all those college degrees. I didn't waste a second. And I had that experience to draw from when I needed it most, to give me the belief and conviction that, Sean, you've overcome so much. You never back down. You did the right thing when no one was around. Keep on this path. And that's what I did.
You wrote the book, right? How long after you got out of being incarcerated did the book come about?
Shortly after that moment where I made that decision, I started writing the book. So I got up every day at 4 a.m. and I'd write for an hour. It took me about 8 months from start to finish and getting it published. So it was published January 2020. So 2 years ago, it was published. And that was, roughly 2 years after I had been out. So Prison of Your Own. It talks about everything I'm sharing today. I go in a lot more detail and I really break down like the psychology behind what it was like being stuck in that cell. What are the thoughts I was having and how did I really change my mindset? Like, how did I change the way I was thinking? How did I train my mind to focus on being present, not let anxiety of the future or stress about the future or depression about the past just bog me down and suck the life out of me? So anybody that might be struggling with mental wellness, mental well-being, your mindset, your daily habits, like whatever it is, I guarantee if you read that book, it's going to give you some powerful strategies and some inspiration that you can apply to your life.
Yeah. One of the things is that, we've obviously been talking more than just obviously the podcast and just different things that are going on in my life. And, you've been obviously a support mechanism and the conversations that we've had. I think one of the things that's inspiring to me is that, sometimes when people start to get influencing and being an influencer and start to get a following and different things, that they become this persona, but they're really not this persona. And I think the one thing that's very, very inspiring is that you're intense at 4 o'clock in the morning. The Instagram reels aren't fake. The Facebook posts are legit when you're saying, hey, I'm willing to bleed to do my deadlifts in the morning. Choice of shoe wear might be a different story, but for me, but the Chucks look good. But you're really truly embracing a 24/7 reaffirmation of the things that you regret. And I think that that's something that's so impactful, that it's not fake, it's real. And I truly have gained a lot from it. I look forward to being able to have conversations with you as far as where it goes. Obviously, people can get the book. They can get the book on Amazon, I would assume. Any other platforms that the book's on that they can buy? Is it in an audio version? Let me ask that question.
Yeah, there's an audio book. You get that on Audible. It's available on a lot of different platforms. Amazon's the easiest one to get.
Okay.
And my new website's being built. It'll be available on there, SeanMichaelCrane.com. But what you said, man, I want to go back real quick. So first of all, that was the first time I wore Chucks when I worked out. I wanted to try them with deadlifting because someone told me they're good because your foot's more flat when you deadlift. But dude,
will it be the last time that you do it?
No, I liked it. I liked the way it felt. Some people do deadlifts barefoot, but here's the thing. I do what I do every day because I have to. Like, I don't think I need to do these things. I'm not listening to society. I do what I do every day to cultivate the right energy and the right mindset so that I can show up in life as my best self. When I get up early and I don't hit snooze and I pull my ass out of bed when I'm tired and go to the gym and crush a workout, you know what that does to me internally? How I feel about myself? It results in pride. It results in knowing I'm giving my all to this life. It results in me not feeling shameful or regretful when I wake up because I said I was going to go to the gym or I said I was going to do these things. Like I found a process that helps me to elevate my internal state, right? So that when I show up for my wife and kids when they get up, I'm there, I'm present. They feel my energy. When I put out a reel on Instagram, you feel the energy, the passion I have, despite the miles between us. Like you can't just fake that. It's something that I've worked really hard to continuously cultivate because the things that I do every day help me to literally feel in love with life and what I get to do. And I want everyone to feel that. I want everyone to see that you can be excited, passionate. You can just attack your life in a way that gives it so much more depth and so much more meaning than just what people go through. People just settle, man. Like they wake up and they're like, another day at work, or they talk all negatively about their life. They don't have energy. They don't have that clarity. They don't feel as vibrant and like, in that beast mode that they want to feel. Like I know everybody wants to wake up and just feel so vibrant, so tapped in, so connected, knowing that they're just living their best life. And the sad truth is most people don't. Most people make excuses like I used to. Most people settle as a person inferior than who they truly could be. And then most people are going to regret it later on. And my mission is to reach as many people as I can with my story, with my message, with my energy to help them make a change now. So when they get to the end of their life, they're like, yes, I gave my all. I'm so glad I just stopped holding back and I just followed that truth in my heart and I started being that person. In whatever capacity that means for you listening, in your marriage, in your business, for yourself, like your truth, you have that truth for a reason. It's a gift. And when you start listening to that conscience that you possess and you're willing to take those actions and those steps, not listening to fear, not listening to doubt, not making excuses, you will create the most beautiful existence you could ever imagine. And I want everyone to feel what that's like. And that's the mission that I'm on, Bill.
Well, with that being said, first and foremost, I totally appreciate your time. My approach to this den was very different than any other approach because I took the approach to say, I'm not putting the content out there. I'm going to be selfish today. I know the amount of people that see our content at One SEO and see what we do and the way we go about it. But man, I get to talk to this guy for an hour. Like I'm sending you texts at 5 a.m. of, hey, I just did my workout on Tonal and Peloton. And I'm not, just because of the craziness I got going on in my life, I can't make it to the gym for 45 minutes, but it's 45 minutes in my home that I'm getting that mental stimulation for 11 straight days that I said, I'm going to commit to changing and creating that habit for 23. And if I get those 23 for 23 out of the gate, I know what the rest of my year is going to be like. I know that I'm going to create that environment that's going to make me successful in what I do. And I think that a lot of that is what you're saying and your message to people is that create the habits that are good for you, create the habits that are going to help you to succeed, do the things that'll make you mentally strong, physically strong, and keep you alert. And I know that your business goes a lot more as far as working with people to get that. Somebody wants to get in touch with you, Facebook, Instagram, I assume are your best bets right now.
Yeah, you can reach out to me directly on Facebook, Instagram, Sean Michael Crane. Like I said, the new website will be up this week, SeanMichaelCrane.com. But I want to touch on what you just said real quick, Bill, because it's so important. I think a lot of people, especially like around the new year, go from not doing anything or very inconsistent to trying to just change their whole life overnight. And when it doesn't go well in the first week or two, they get discouraged and they quit and give up. But you just got to focus on like incremental wins each day that start building momentum over time. If you're somebody that wants to start getting up earlier so you can go to the gym, don't go from like getting up at 7 to 3:30 or 4. Like move it back 30 minutes. Get up at 6 or 6:30 and start your day off that way. Start establishing that habit, right? In the gym, don't expect to just go from not working out to running marathons to just crushing your workouts. Just get that first 20 minutes in. Start with walks every day. Start building up this momentum. Because what that does is it shifts the way you perceive yourself. Your identity really shifts over time. Now you're not someone that just wants to work out or wants to be healthier or wants to have a better mindset or wants to make more money, but you're somebody that's becoming a person that can create those outcomes. And it's a gradual shift that takes place over time. But here's the thing. If you're a business owner or someone in life that just wants to absolutely crush it, being physically fit and having these daily routines is such a powerful tool that's going to amplify your success in other areas of life. Like I'm telling you, me as a father, me as a leader for my family, me in my business, me generating revenue, all of those things are better off when I'm taking care of myself. When I'm doing the right things to have confidence, my mindset's locked in, I'm focused, I'm working out, I feel like a beast in the gym, I'm cultivating that proper internal state every day through actions that align to who I want to be. I show up in life as a much different individual, a higher caliber of individual. And people feel that energy. You can't fake it. It's passion, it's love. Like I'm cultivating it internally. Now I can share it with other people. So whether it's your team, your customers, your family, people will feel that. If anyone's listening to this and you're not working out, you know you should be. You're not taking care of yourself, you know you should be. You're not doing the things that your heart's calling you to do. You got to start now. And you got to recognize the ROI in 5 or 10 or 20 years in everything that you do. You as a better version of yourself is always going to show up with exceptionally better results in all of the areas of life because that's who you are and that's the outcomes that you create when you're that person.
That's an unstoppable mindset if I've ever heard one. So listen, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you being in the den. Appreciate you sharing your story. It's obviously that the pride that goes into the decisions that you made after your incarceration are the things that lead your life, lead your family and your business. And, I appreciate the time and look forward to the continued conversation. So I want to thank you for being in the den. Sean Michael Crane, everybody.
Thanks, Bill.
All right. Thank you.